We recently started a project that required multiple students and collaborators to work on a single code repository. And that really forced us to figure out Git. And I wanted to share with you our Git workflow. So the idea behind Git is that you would have a central repository, and that repository would probably be somewhere on GitHub. So that's a central or online repository. And then what would happen is each user that's contributing to the project would clone this repository. So let's say we've got a user called Emma, then she would clone this on her local machine. And if there were a third user called Chris, then Chris would also copy this thing onto his local machine and have a copy of the repository and then work on that repository here. Now these little nodes, they would represent commits, which you will learn about. And the idea is that this will represent the project's history. So this was the first commit, then some changes was made to the code. This is the second commit and so on. And this is a particularly important branch called the main branch. And then at some point, someone decided that there should be some new feature, and then a specific feature branch was created. Let's just call it the underscore feature. And then some changes was made there, and then that was incorporated into the main branch at some point. And now Emma has a copy of this on her machine, and she now wants to make changes. So what she would then do is she would start a new branch called, I don't know, another feature. So she would branch off from main and have a new branch here called another feature. And she would make changes to this branch on her local machine. Make a commit, change some code, add some documentation, have another commit, and so on. What she would then do is she could do what we call a push to the online or the remote repository to incorporate this branch on this repository. And what that would mean is that the stuff that happened here would basically be represented here as well. So, okay, and these commits would match these exactly. So that's through what we would call a push command. What happened locally, it pushes it to the remote repository. Okay, now the main branch, that's the important one, the thing where everything is controlled and where everything should be stable. So the idea is that in here, and then later on in here, this should represent development and Emma figuring out what she's doing and what the code should do and making sure that it's working properly. At some point, this is stable, and then she would push it, and that would be here. And then she would put in a request to basically update the main branch to represent the changes that's done there. And that's called a pull request. And she would do this on GitHub, and she would say, listen, please someone look at what the things I've done and decide whether it's stable enough. And if it is, and the pull request gets accepted, then that would get merged into the main branch here. So that point would actually get updated to reflect the changes that was made locally. Emma would also like her repository locally to always be updated. So she could also do a general pull, which basically makes sure that all the changes that's reflected here is reflected in her local repository. So there's also a pull there. It's a little bit confusing. Pull request, which basically means merging in some changes, but then also the pull, which says update the things here so that it matches what happened here. Now another user, Retief, might also make changes. They would also be pushing and pulling and making pull requests to merge with the main branch, and all of these things can happen at the same time. These are the main steps of our workflow that we're going to follow. So what we're going to do is someone is probably going to create a repository before the first step. And then what we're going to do is locally, we're going to clone the repository using a command like this one. We're going to do some work locally, which would mean creating a branch. That's where we're going to develop our new feature or our new code. We're going to make some changes on this branch. So we might create a new script. We will then add that to the Git tracking information with a command like this. We will create a commit saying these are the changes that's been made. And then we're going to push that upstream to the remote repository. And that really just pushes this specific branch new feature to the remote repository. And then after that, we might continue doing this again and again, making some changes, pushing all of that information to the GitHub repository so that it's backed up. While we're doing that, the main branch actually doesn't get updated. All of this happens both locally on my new feature branch and also then on GitHub. The new feature branch will also reflect these changes. And then once we've tested everything and we're happy that everything is working correctly and integrating correctly with the rest of the tools, then we will make what we call a pull request to basically say, listen, take all these changes that I've made on this new branch. Please check that what I've done is correct and that you agree with that, and then combine those changes into my main branch. And actually that happens before the steps here. That will happen online on GitHub somewhere, so it's a little step there. And then after all of that, then what we'll do is we'll clean up the feature branch and basically remove it and go on with our lives. That was very quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a little demo where I illustrate exactly all of these steps, and I'll try and draw out the repositories as we're going along. Really, the first step before any of this can happen is to create a repository. And this is something that someone else will probably do. But we're going to go through those steps anyway. Excuse my face. So what we're going to do here, this is on GitHub. This is what GitHub looks like. We're going to create a new repository. We're going to see how badly I messed this up. We're going to call it a new project. Just not give it a description, but you can fill in a description there. I'll make it private just so that someone can't see that I'm making a small tutorial video. I'll add a README file. This is useful to do, but maybe there's a README file already, then you don't have to do this. Gitignore is something that I'll say something about later on, and you can also add a specific license if you want to do that upfront already. So this is our little repository. And we actually have a first commit already in our repository. So it's commit, that's the commit. And all that this commit says is there's really nothing that happened. The README file got added, and the README has a title called new project. We're on our main branch and we've got one single commit, and that commit has this little description called initial commit. So typically before you as the local user actually gets to this project, there will probably be a few more commits, changes being made, files being added. So let's just do a small commit here on GitHub so that we can basically simulate that there's been some changes. So I'll just open the README file and then just add a little bit. Well, let's make this nice and proper. New project. And then we just say here, overview, an example project. Okay. And then we can commit these changes. There's a message. You probably want to say something a little bit more descriptive than just that, but we commit the changes, saving, and now we've got 2 commits on this project. So if we click there, this is the last commit that we've got. It tells me how long ago it's been committed. If I click on history, I can see that this was the initial commit, and then this is now a second commit. So really the little picture here looks like this. We now have a second commit here, and that commit has the little description. I'm not going to write it. That description is updated the README to reflect something. Awesome. So this is all remotely. This is online on GitHub, and this is like the main branch, and this is something where the boss would have edited things and made changes, and now we get to the project and we want to contribute to the project. So the first thing to do then is to actually clone this repository locally. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a local copy of this, which means that the stuff here really gets copied directly onto my drive here. So it might look like something like this. These things mirror these exactly. So it's also on my main branch. Okay, so how do we get that in? We use the git clone command. So we type in git clone, and then you would paste in this link there. Okay, and now actually, I don't want to do a full list because then you'll see all the rubbish that's in my home directory. But if you go here, we do list, then you see the README. We can look at the README. Boom. That's all the stuff from the repository already, and you can see that it's the most up-to-date README as well. Wonderful. We can do a git log, and there you see actually the previous commits that's been made. Now what we want to do is we actually want to extend this project and create some new feature. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new branch. What that's going to look like is we'll start from the last commit from the main, and then what we'll do is we'll branch out and create our first little commit here for on a new branch, which we'll call new feature. And how we do that is we use the checkout command. So we do git checkout, and then we do the /b that says create a new branch. So we'll do new feature. To just check which branch I'm on, I can do git branch, and I see I'm on the new feature branch. And now what you can do is you can make all types of changes here, and that will basically be particular to this branch. So if you mess stuff up here as we're working along, it's kind of fine because the main branch here and even the main branch locally, there's still the thing that's working, the proper stuff that's happening there. So let's just add a little script here. Sublime new script. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll add a little Python script that just prints hello. Okay. Let's see if that runs. Python new script prints hello. Wonderful. Now this file I've added, but it's actually not being tracked by Git. If I do git status, I can see that there's an untracked file. So what I will do is I will git add new script, and that means Git pays attention to this file. If changes happen to this file, it gets tracked in the version history, and this file is part of my repository. So I do git add new script. I do git status. It now tells me that there's some changes that haven't been committed yet, but that there's also a new file that is being tracked called new script. So let's commit this. So we do git commit. Can't remember what the -a stands for. You can check that up. -m says I'm going to add a message. And what I'll do is I'll say added my new script. This little message that I add, it's similar to the message that you have here, like the updated, the README or the initial commit message. It's exactly the same thing. It's just for this specific branch that I'm on now. Wonderful. So what that has done, I've added a new commit here, and I'm now actually there. Maybe I'll make one more change so that it reflects the picture that we have here. New script, print hello, print yippee. Okay, and now if I do git status, it will tell me the script has been modified. Sublime Text is actually quite nice. It highlights the line that has been changed and it hasn't actually been committed yet. I think many other editors do the same thing. So if you then do git commit all and a message, another change, cool. And you will see in Sublime, it's actually removed that little line there. And now if we do git log, you can see that we have the initial commit. We have the initial commit from the main branch. We have the updated the README to reflect something from main. Then we split off, we added the new script, and then we added another change there. And that's how things are right now. Now, none of these are actually reflected on GitHub. If we go to GitHub, you will see there's a main branch here. There's no other branches. So what we want to do is we actually want to make sure that the stuff here gets reflected onto GitHub here. So how we do that is with the git push command. So we do git push. Okay, then it actually gives me an error, but the error is very useful because I always forget the command, and this tells me what the command is. So I tried to push it, which means I tried to take these things and get them reflected here. And then it told me, listen, you need to tell me specifically where you want this to end up and what the branch name should be on the remote location. And this set upstream, what that does is it just says that if after I've basically put the changes here and some changes happen here, on GitHub that you track these things so that if I pull again, that these changes get reflected there. If you don't understand any of that, that's fine. You'll learn with experience. The important thing is that's a command that you want to run. So we run that command, and now you see that on GitHub, this new feature branch has actually appeared here. Wonderful. And so if I click on view all branches, then you can see that the new feature branch now exists here. So on our little diagram, what has happened is this has been basically copied over onto GitHub, and this branch now lives here as well. And these things are exact copies of what happened there. Okay, now the thing that we actually want is we want the main, which is the big boss, to reflect the changes here. We've made some changes and we're sure we're working. And that's the whole point of a branch. You can mess things up here. That's fine, right? You can fiddle with things. You can even delete things, add things, and so on. And then at some point, it becomes stable enough that you want to tell the whole world what has happened there. And typically what would happen is these branches, most of the time it would be a single person working on a single branch, but everyone will be pulling from the main branch. Okay. Now, after this has become stable, what we want to do is we actually want to update the main branch to reflect these changes. And the way to do that is through a pull request. So on GitHub, you would click here. You can also just go on the branch and then say compare and create a pull request. So we would do that directly on GitHub. And the aim of the game here is to basically take these things and update main to reflect those changes. Compare and pull request. Okay, so it does some checks. What I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm going to merge into main, and I'm going to do that from the new feature branch. You probably want to add a description to describe what were the main things that changed here, because someone else is going to most probably review what you've done and made sure that it's actually working properly and integrating with the bigger project. Okay, so you can see here also these are the things that's going to be going to change. So then we can say create pull request. Okay. It does some checks to make sure that things can happen automatically. You can set things up or add rules so that actually approval is required from specific people before what I've done here can be basically merged into the main branch. But for now, I'm not going to add a rule because I'm just illustrating what's happening. So I will just remove that. Okay. Now what would happen is actually the boss will probably go on GitHub. So you will see there, there's a pull request. So this is someone else that would go here. They would then open this up and see, this is what's going on. They would probably click around on the commits and try and see what happened. This guy added this script. That looks really nice. They might even leave messages and give some feedback and say, listen, do this differently, do this differently. And if that happens, you will make changes on your local branch and push that again. And again, that will then be reflected on this pull request. So after there's been some discussion and you can add comments and so on, the big boss will say, okay, excellent. Let's merge this in. We're happy with the changes. And then they would click here, merge pull request. Boom. Okay, and then it would say, you can say confirm merge. Pull request successfully merged and closed. And so what happened now, let's click around here and see if we can see exactly what happened. If I click on all my commits, the history, then what you will see here is that there's actually now something new, a merge pull request from new feature. And so what happened here is that the changes that we made up to this point has now been pulled in. And there's now a new commit here, which really reflects the changes that I've made up to that point. So it now looks like this. It also combines the history from before. And everything is nice, and we've added this new feature. One thing that's nice is we can actually delete this branch now. We go to the closed pull request, and then what we could say, pull request successfully merged and closed. you're all set. The new feature branch can safely be deleted. So let's delete that branch, and it's actually safe to do that. Okay, that branch is now deleted, and this is all cleaned up. If you go to the main repository, there's only one branch here, main. And the cool thing is, if you look at the history, that added my new script and added another change. The things that happened here and were then like reflected here and here, those have now really been just like merged into this little history here, and the branch has actually been deleted. And that's absolutely fine. And the main now reflects all the history of everything that happened, but the repository isn't so cluttered. Now let's just think a little bit about what happened locally. So locally, none of this happened. If we go back here and we do git log, that merge doesn't reflect locally on my machine. So we want to make sure that we update all the changes that's happened remotely and that we have the latest main in our local repository. So what we would do is, just as a reminder, we're currently on the new feature branch. So what we want to do is we want to move to the main branch. Okay, and just quickly, I used the checkout command, but I didn't do the -b because -b would create a new branch. But just checkout just moves, and -b creates a new branch. So let's just check. We're now on the main branch. Excellent. We clear the screen, git log. And what you see here is that we're actually a little bit behind. We're stuck here at the moment on our main branch. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that all the changes here gets reflected here. And the way we would do that is to run git pull. Let's do git log. And now what you can see is everything that happened remotely, if we click here, all these things are now reflected locally on my machine. So really what's happened is my machine now looks like this, the local machine. We deleted the branch remotely. So actually this stuff was just moved in here. So they're really just sitting there, and this branch doesn't exist anymore. So actually this isn't exactly what happened when we did the pull. The pull really did this, and then included in here that, and that is also on the pull request. Okay, so the last thing we can do just locally is we can delete this branch so that we don't have to, because we're not keeping track of that anymore. We're just looking at the main thing that everyone has done. So git branch lists all my branches, and what I can do is git branch delete new feature, enter, and that branch has now been deleted and everything is nice and clean. Awesome. And that's the main workflow. What you would then do, so we're sitting at this point, this has been removed, and what you can then do is you can again branch out and start a new feature and go on like that. Dunk, 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 dunk. And the cool thing about this is everyone is working from the main thing. So everyone is looking at this, and as they're locally developing their own features, they can do that on their own time. And in that way, people can collaborate and work on the same project at the same time.